What do you do when life refuses to meet your expectations? When the promotion you worked for slips away? When the person you trusted lets you down? When your careful plans collapse into chaos? Disappointment arrives like a sudden storm, shaking your confidence and clouding your mind. Yet the Stoics remind us, disappointment is not a dead end, but an invitation. An invitation to shift our view, to discover strength we didn't know we had. This is where philosophy meets real life, at the very edge of our frustration. Think about your own life. Have you ever poured months of effort into a project, only to see it dismissed in seconds? Or pinned your hopes on someone, only to watch them walk away? In those moments, disappointment feels heavy, like carrying a weight that no one else can see. It whispers, "You have failed. You are not enough." But the Stoics understood this pain well. They lived through betrayals, losses, and setbacks far greater than ours. And still, they found a way not only to endure, but to grow stronger. Stoicism is not about pretending we don't care. It is not about suppressing emotions. It is about meeting life with wisdom. Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, wrote daily in his journal to remind himself, "You cannot control the outcome, only your response." Epictetus, once a slave, endured cruelty and loss, yet found freedom in the power of perspective. And Seneca, exiled and betrayed, turned disappointment into timeless letters of strength. Their wisdom is not ancient dust, it is practical fire, a light for our darkest days of frustration. By the end of this video, you will hold 7 Stoic lessons to transform disappointment into resilience. These are not abstract ideas, but practical tools, anchors for the office when projects collapse, for relationships when trust is shaken, for your own heart when plans unravel. The Stoics teach us that disappointment, though painful, is never final. It is raw material for growth. You cannot always choose the outcome, but you can always choose who you become through it. And that choice is your greatest power. So when life doesn't go as planned, you are not powerless. You are standing at the threshold of a deeper strength. Disappointment is real, but so is your ability to rise. In this journey, we will walk with Marcus, Seneca, and Epictetus, not as distant statues, but as guides whispering across centuries. Together, we will learn to stand unshaken when the world shifts beneath us. Because what stands in the way is not your defeat, it is the way forward. This is where your Stoic miracle begins. Lesson 1. Disappointment is information, not identity. The Stoics remind us, disappointment is not who you are, it is a signal. Too often, we mistake a failed project or a broken plan as a reflection of our worth. But disappointment is simply feedback, showing us what matters to us, what needs improvement, or where our attachments run deep. To feel disappointed means you dared to care. It means you invested yourself in something meaningful. That is not weakness, it is strength. The danger lies in letting disappointment define you, in hearing its whisper as truth. You are a failure. Instead, the Stoic way is to listen, learn, and move forward wiser than before. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it. And this you have the power to revoke at any moment." Disappointment is not the event itself, but the meaning we attach to it. To Marcus, the loss, the rejection, the setback, none of these carried power on their own. It was his judgment that gave them weight. If judgment can wound, it can also heal. By shifting the way we see disappointment, we reclaim freedom over our own minds. Consider Seneca, exiled from Rome, stripped of influence and position. To most, exile was ultimate failure, a humiliation. But Seneca reframed it. He wrote letters of wisdom that would outlive emperors, transforming exile into legacy. His disappointment was real, but he did not let it define him. Instead, he asked, "What can I do with this?" And from that question came some of the most enduring works of Stoic philosophy. Disappointment did not mark the end of his story. It became the soil where his greatest strength took root. His example reminds us, what feels like loss today may become tomorrow's wisdom. So how do we use this today? The next time disappointment strikes, pause and ask, what is this teaching me? Instead of drowning in why me, shift to what now? If your project fails, perhaps it highlights skills to sharpen. If a relationship falters, maybe it reveals the depth of your values. Write it down, journal it, strip it of judgment, and treat it as information. This practice transforms disappointment from an identity into a tool. You are not the failure. You are the one. Lesson 2. Control the controllable. Most of our disappointment deepens not because of what happened, but because of our attempt to control what we never could. We replay the event, wishing the past could change, wishing people had acted differently. But the Stoics insist, your freedom lies only in your choices, your judgments, your actions. You cannot command the outcome, only your effort. The more you cling to what lies outside your control, the heavier disappointment grows. But when you release it, when you center yourself in what you can do, suddenly, disappointment shrinks. It is no longer an immovable wall, but simply a moment, a place to choose again. Epictetus, who knew the limits of control better than most, said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." This simple division is the gateway to peace. When disappointment strikes, ask, is this within my power or beyond it? If it is within, act with courage. If it is beyond, release it. Disappointment loses its sting when you stop fighting reality. Freedom comes not by bending the world, but by mastering yourself. Seneca, the great Roman statesman, faced exile and betrayal. Stripped of position and friends, he could have drowned in disappointment. Instead, he turned inward to what remained in his control, his mind, his words, his philosophy. From exile came letters that still inspire across centuries. His life reminds us, emperors may control your status, but not your thoughts. Fortune may control your circumstances, but not your virtue. Disappointment tested Seneca, but he did not let it define him. He released what was gone and worked with what remained. And from that practice, wisdom flourished. In your own life, practice the circle of control. Write down 2 lists, what you can influence and what you cannot. Place your disappointment into the right circle. Did a colleague dismiss your idea? You cannot control their opinion, but you can refine your proposal, sharpen your delivery, or bring it elsewhere. Did a plan collapse? You cannot undo the past, but you can choose your next step. By focusing energy only on what is yours, you reclaim freedom. Disappointment becomes lighter because you stop carrying. Lesson 3. The power of perspective. Disappointment narrows our vision. It convinces us that a single setback is the whole story, that failure today is the end of tomorrow. The Stoics remind us to step back, to see the larger picture. When you widen your perspective, disappointment changes shape. What feels devastating now may later reveal itself as a lesson, a turning point, or even a blessing in disguise. Perspective doesn't erase the pain, it reframes it. Against the vast canvas of life, today's disappointment becomes one brushstroke, not the whole painting. And in that wider frame, resilience is born. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power to strip away many superfluous troubles, for they lie entirely in your judgment." Disappointment is often a story we tell ourselves, magnified beyond reality. A missed opportunity becomes proof of unworthiness. A rejection becomes a verdict on our value. But Marcus reminds us, the weight of disappointment is determined by our judgment. Change the story, and you change the burden. The event remains, but you no longer collapse beneath it. Perspective is not denial, it is liberation. Consider a Roman general who lost a battle but preserved his army. To the soldiers, defeat seemed absolute. But the general saw it differently. Survival was an opportunity to rebuild, to learn, to fight again. History remembers not the sting of that single loss, but the victories that followed. Disappointment works the same. It tricks us into thinking the story ends here. But when we zoom out, what seemed like failure becomes a step in a longer journey. The Stoics practiced this cosmic perspective daily, training themselves to see human struggles against the backdrop of eternity. In that scale, disappointment is real, but never final. How do we apply this today? When disappointment strikes, zoom out. Ask yourself, will this matter in 5 years? 10. Picture your life as a timeline stretching far beyond today. Or look up at the night sky. Against the stars, your failure feels both small and strangely beautiful, evidence that you dared to try, that you care. Perspective doesn't dismiss your pain, it puts it in proportion. The setback is no longer a dead end, but a step in growth. Shift the frame, and disappointment transforms from heavy chain into passing visit. Lesson 4. Amor Fati, accepting fate. When disappointment strikes, our first instinct is resistance. We tell ourselves, this should not have happened. The Stoics challenged this reaction with one radical idea, amor fati, the love of fate. To love fate is to embrace life exactly as it unfolds, not only the victories, but also the setbacks. Disappointment does not vanish with acceptance, but its sting softens. It becomes not an enemy, but raw material, waiting to be shaped into strength. The Stoics remind us, what we resist, we suffer twice. What we accept, we can transform. Fate is not against you, it is your teacher. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "A blazing fire makes flame and brightness out of everything thrown into it." This is amor fati, to meet every event, even disappointment, as fuel for your inner fire. Later, Nietzsche echoed the same wisdom. Amor fati, let that be my love henceforth. I do not want to wage war against what is ugly. I want to learn to love everything that happens. To the Stoics, disappointment is not wasted time. It is wood for the fire. What you throw into your soul can either consume you or light the path forward. Marcus Aurelius knew disappointment intimately. He faced endless wars on Rome's borders, betrayals within his court, and the heartbreaking loss of his own children. Yet he did not curse fate. Instead, in his meditations, he returned again and again to the principle of amor fati. This, too, is nature's work. To him, disappointment was not punishment but assignment, a challenge to practice patience, resilience, and wisdom. He treated grief as a sculptor treats rough marble, something imperfect, yet holding the potential for beauty. By loving his fate, Marcus turned setbacks into stepping stones. His story teaches us, disappointment loses its chains when you embrace it as part of the design. How do we practice amor fati in daily life? Start small. When plans collapse, resist the urge to ask why me. Instead, ask how can this serve me? Lost a client? Maybe it teaches resilience and opens new doors. Missed an opportunity? Perhaps it sharpens your focus for the next. Even heartbreak can deepen compassion. The Stoics are not telling us to smile through pain, but to face it with curiosity instead of resistance. Accept it, embrace it, even love it, and you turn disappointment into strength. Amor fati is Lesson 5, Virtue over Emotion. The Stoics believe the true measure of a life is not how often you avoided disappointment, but how faithfully you lived with virtue. Wisdom, justice, courage, and temperance. These 4 pillars stood above fleeting emotions. Disappointment, sadness, and frustration may come, but they cannot dictate who you are. Only your actions can. Even in the midst of broken plans, you can still choose honesty. Even in frustration, you can still choose kindness. Virtue transforms disappointment into a testing ground, a place where your highest self is refined. Emotions may storm around you, but virtue anchors you. Seneca wrote, "The wise man is content with himself." His meaning was clear. No wave of disappointment can drown the person rooted in virtue. Wealth, status, and recognition may be taken away, but integrity, your choice to live with courage and justice, cannot. Disappointment tempts us to retreat, to collapse into self-pity. But Seneca reminds us, your value is not measured by how pleased you feel, but by how you live. In virtue lies an unshakable dignity that no rejection, no failure, no disappointment can destroy. Cato the Younger, Roman senator and Stoic, faced bitter disappointments. He lost political battles, watched corruption thrive, and carried heavy grief. Yet he never betrayed his principles. Even when defeat was certain, he chose integrity over compromise. His enemies could break his position, but not his character. History does not remember him for sadness or failure, but for the virtue with which he stood firm. Cato's story shows us disappointment will come, but the truest victory is not in outcomes, but in holding fast to virtue. The storm passes, but character endures. How can we practice this today? When disappointment strikes, ask, what does virtue require of me now? You may feel overlooked at work, yet you can still choose excellence. You may feel heartbroken, yet you can still choose compassion. Even small acts, keeping a promise, speaking truth, showing patience, are victories over despair. Disappointment is not weakness. It is a proving ground where virtue shines brightest. Live with virtue, and no disappointment can defeat you. For emotions shake us, but virtue roots us. Lesson 6. Fear as teacher, not enemy. Every disappointment carries a shadow, fear. Fear of trying again, fear of losing again, fear of being seen as a failure. Most of us treat fear as an enemy, but the Stoics approached it differently. To them, fear is a teacher. Fear points to where our attachments are strongest, to the things we think we cannot live without. Rather than flee, the Stoic invites us to study fear, to let it guide our training. If disappointment whispers, "You cannot handle this," the Stoic answers, "This is exactly where strength is built." Fear is not a prison, but a classroom. Seneca wrote, "We are more often frightened than hurt, and we suffer more in imagination than in reality." Fear magnifies disappointment, transforming a single rejection into a prophecy of endless failure. Yet Seneca reminds us, the mind paints monsters larger than life. The cure is not to silence fear, but to question it. Ask, is this truly dangerous, or just my imagination inflating it? By separating reality from illusion, we shrink fear back to size. And when fear shrinks, disappointment loses its claws. Epictetus, once a slave, lived under the daily threat of cruelty. Fear could have consumed him. Instead, he transformed it into discipline. He taught his students, fear shows you what to train. If you fear poverty, practice simplicity. If you fear loss, meditate on impermanence. By rehearsing difficulties in his mind, Epictetus made himself stronger than the blows of fate. Disappointment came often, but he faced it with calm because fear had already been stripped of its power. His life reminds us, fear, when embraced as teacher, becomes a forge where resilience is shaped. How can you apply this? Try fear setting, a Stoic exercise. Write down your fear tied to disappointment. I will never succeed. I will always be rejected. Then ask, what's the worst that could realistically happen? How likely is it? What steps could I take if it did? This pulls fear out of shadow and into light. At work, it might mean preparing for rejection instead of dreading it. In relationships, it might mean seeing loss not as annihilation, but as an opening to grow. Once examined, fear is no longer a monster, it is a mentor. Lesson 7. Freedom lies in perspective. The Stoics taught that freedom does not come from escaping pain, but from reframing it. Disappointment tempts us to believe we are trapped, that failure defines us, that doors are closed forever. But perspective is the hidden key. When we change how we view the same event, we unlock ourselves from within. To see disappointment as a lesson rather than a curse, as a temporary chapter rather than a final verdict, is to reclaim freedom. Perspective does not deny reality, it reshapes it. Chains dissolve when you realize they were made of judgment all along. Epictetus declared, "Man is not disturbed by things, but by the views he takes of them." Disappointment is not the chain, our perception is. The same rejection can feel like destruction or redirection, depending on the lens we choose. To the Stoics, freedom was always internal. They could not control the twists of fate, but they could control their judgment. And in that judgment lies the power to lighten any burden. Perspective is not weakness, it is strength disguised as clarity. Viktor Frankl, imprisoned in concentration camps during the Holocaust, faced unimaginable loss. Yet even there, He discovered a freedom that no captor could touch, the freedom to choose his perspective. He wrote later, "Everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances." His insight echoed Epictetus, who lived in chains yet taught freedom of the mind. Both remind us, disappointment may weigh heavily, but it cannot imprison your perspective. And in perspective lies dignity, meaning, and resilience. To apply this, practice reframing. When disappointment tells you, "This is the end," reframe it. "This is a beginning." When it whispers, "I am broken," respond, "I am being reshaped." Write down one disappointment and then rewrite its story from a new angle, one that highlights growth, wisdom, or resilience. At work, a failed project becomes training for the next. In love, heartbreak proves your capacity to care deeply. Freedom is not found in avoiding disappointment, but in choosing the perspective that transforms it. When you shift the frame, prison walls become open doors. Conclusion: dealing with disappointment. When life doesn't go as planned, we began with disappointment, its sting, its weight, its shadow. And we discovered through the Stoics that disappointment is not a dead end, but a doorway. We learned that it is information, not identity. That freedom lies in focusing on what we control. That perspective reshapes pain into growth. That Amor Fati teaches us to love fate, even when it wounds. That virtue outlasts emotions. Fear becomes a teacher, and freedom always lies within. Disappointment will visit us again, but it no longer rules us. Instead, it becomes a companion on the road to wisdom and resilience. Tomorrow may bring another setback. A door may close. A plan may collapse. But now, you are equipped. You know disappointment is not the end. It is the beginning of growth. Each failure, each rejection, is material for your inner fire. The Stoics remind us, no one can take your mind, your virtue, your perspective. When disappointment knocks, you need not break. You can stand. You can transform. And in that standing, you discover that your spirit is stronger than any obstacle. Disappointment is not your enemy. It is your trainer, shaping you into resilience itself. Here is your practice. The next time disappointment arrives, pause. Breathe. Write it down. Ask, what is this teaching me? What can I control? What perspective will set me free? Live those answers. Return to them whenever life feels heavy. This is how setbacks become stepping stones and wounds become wisdom. Remember, what stands in the way is not your downfall. It is the way forward. This is the miracle of Stoicism, turning disappointment into dignity and pain into power. Stand strong, live wisely, and carry this truth. What stands in the way becomes the way.